Some say Chinese is one of the most difficult languages in the world, and learning it is almost impossible.
So learning Chinese, the most difficult thing.
非常非常非常非常非常难
So I'm sort of tone deaf. I can't really hear them.
I think the cultural mindset is the biggest complication for
The
us.
grammar.
知吃思诗都还难
It's just complicated so much.
Only because you're not learning it in the right way. Why not try Takeaway Chinese, where you can take some Chinese away and experience progress day by day. Takeaway Chinese, we will promise you a difference.
你好，欢迎收听随行汉语 Welcome to Takeaway Chinese. I'm Fei Fei, and for today's episode, as always, I'm joined by Tony Reed in this studio.
Hey Faye, what's going on? It's a pleasure to be here. What are we talking about today?
So, first of all, this summer, I think we are welcoming the end of this summer, but I have to tell you, the heat is still around.
Yeah. Record-breaking heat waves this year, not just in China, but all over the world. It's been really, really hot. People are struggling to get through this heat this year, and I find that I just don't want to go outside. It's better to just stay home in the air conditioning.
Exactly, like the air conditioning. Well, I think I'm entering this dilemma with air conditioning right now that if you turn on a lot of air conditioning, which means the climate is getting warmer and warmer. But if I didn't turn on the air conditioning, I'm suffering here, right now. I need it. It's so hot. And also so humid. Yeah, so I'm sort of in the dilemma of turning on or turning off. I don't know. So
yeah, that's a interesting narrative in 2022. A lot of people are factoring in the environment, which is good because that's not something that most of us did in the past. So it's a good way to think. But when it comes down to it, it's about survival, right? And it's been so hot that I think if you don't use the air conditioning, it could be potentially dangerous.
Yeah.
So just trying to weather through this year has been pretty tough.
And so in this episode today, we're going to talk about how to cool yourself down without the air conditioning.
What?
Maybe some, herbal methods or some new other methods that we can use.
Oh, I'd like to hear that.
Yeah.
So maybe you can educate me on this.
So, why not we hear a small dialogue on this subject about the heat and how to cool off this summer first.
你刚才去干什么了？怎么满头大汗？
天太热了，我只是出门走了走而已，就出了一身汗。
那可千万不要中暑了。说到这儿，要不要来一碗我刚熬好的绿豆汤？
好呀，给我来一碗。
So, sentence by sentence of this dialogue. 你刚才干什么了？怎么满头大汗？
So this is, what did you do just now? You're sweating a lot. That sounds like a question that people ask me all the time because I sweat more than anyone that I know. I mean, I'm just...
Is it because you work out and you have like a higher level of...
No, I think it has something to do with your genetics.
Oh.
It's just, I sweat gallons when I work out.
So this is a good, useful sentence.
Yeah. This is a really useful sentence. So, 你刚才. So this is 你 is you, and then 刚才, I believe this is just now, right?
Yes.
And then 去干, so 去 is go, yeah?
Yes.
And then 干什么了? I know 什么了 is what. And then 干 here, what is that?
干 is like do. You just now go do what? And the le here doesn't really have any meaning, but it's more of a function word.
It's kind of like something that has been done already, right? Doesn't it denote like past,
like the past tense
action, right?
Yes.
Okay. So 你刚才去干什么了？怎么馒头? So 怎么 is like, isn't that like how?
Yes, exactly.
And then 馒头. I think this is like I've heard this before. It's like a something that's someone's head or something like
It's full of.
Full, yeah, okay, full of something.
So 满头大汗 should be like...
Oh, it's a set phrase.
It's a set phrase. And,
so 满头大汗.
Yes, and 满头means just full of your head. 大汗 is a lot of sweat. So
Okay.
why are you having a lot of sweat? I think it's sort of a metaphor here.
Okay.
We see a lot of sweat all over your head. An expression to just say that you are sweating a lot. It doesn't mean that you are just sweating on your head. You know?
So is that the only way to indicate that someone's sweating? Because like, 你有打汗, I mean, that means you have sweat, right? I mean, does that work? Or can you just say you're sweating? How do you say that someone, hey, you're sweating, are you okay?
If you want to say you are sweating, it's not 大汗, it's 出汗.
出汗, also it
Chu
changes.
is like out. So I'm seeing a lot of sweat coming out of you. 你在出汗, you are sweating.
你在. So this is the present continuous, right?
Yes, 你在出汗.
Okay.
So 满头大汗, 大汗 is rarely used, separately in other sentences or phrases, but it's more just in this set phrase. 满头大汗.
Okay, good to know. 出汗 and 大汗.
Yeah.
But largely 出汗, right? For
Largely
sweat.
出汗. 大汗, well, it has different meanings. It means the head of a tribe from a nomad
Oh my goodness.
group. So don't want to use 大汗 separately from this phrase.
Wow,
Yeah.
okay.
And the next one, 天太热了，我只是出门走了走而已，就出了一身汗。
So this is, the weather is too hot. I just went out for a little walk and I'm sweating all over my body. Again, sounds like me. So Tien is weather, and then Tai Zhe, right? Tai is too, like too much of something, and then Zhe is hot, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then 我只是
只是
只是. So this is I, and I think this is just, right?
Yes.
And then 出门
出门
出门. So I'm thinking 出 is go, right?
is out.
It's out,
Yes.
right? 门 is like a door,
Yes.
isn't it? So like out the door. And then 走了. Is this 走了? 走, this is another expression, right?
Yes, 走了走. It can be used in a lot of verbs, but here it just means I have a little walk.
Go for a walk.
Yes.
And then 而已. So what is 而已 here?
Well, 而已 is actually used in conjunction with 只是. 只是 something 而已, meaning I merely, I just.
So you have to use this with 只是.
只是, yes.
Okay, and that means just. Okay, so just has two components. All right.
It's more precisely, I think he's saying it's nothing more than something between 只是 and 而已. For instance, it's just a TV series. 只是电视剧而已. It's just a TV series. So you're saying is that something between 只是 and 而已 is not more than what it is.
Okay, got it. I think that was explained pretty good. And then 就出了. 就出了. And this means, I think, sweating, right?
就出了. 就 here is, I think is more, can be meaning or just, or
Okay.
as a result.
Oh, as a result. Okay.
出了, it's in combination with the the words after it, 一身汗. So I just told you that 出汗 means sweating, sweat. And 出了一身汗 means I have a lot of sweat. I have sweat all over my body.
Right. Han, I think that word here indicates sweat, right?
Yeah, it's the noun version of sweat. And 出汗 is like the verb.
Yeah,
of
sweating.
Yes.
Okay. And then 一身 again, what is this?
一身, it means all over
All
your
over
body.
the body, or 身.
A full body of.
So 身 means body.
Yes, 身 means body.
Okay.
一身汗, or so it means basically also a lot of sweat.
Okay. So what does the yi and the shun denote here? Shun means body, right?
Yeah.
The shun ti. And then the yi, what is this?
It's like full of,
Okay.
all over my body. Well, it sounds maybe wrong in English, but in Chinese it's just a way of saying I have a lot of sweat all over me.
Right. Okay.
And the next one is 那可千万不要中暑了.
So this is be careful not to get a heat stroke. So 那可 So I think this is then, right?
Yes.
So 拿可千万, I don't know what that means either.
So 千万is a very tricky word here, but it's very interesting. It means to be sure of.
Okay.
It usually means follows by something I think has a negative meaning.
Okay.
That you be sure that you are not something of. For instance, that place is very dangerous. Make sure you don't go there. 千万不要去. Make sure you don't go there.
Make sure.
Yeah, so I don't think it can be saying that you are commending someone, but you are suggesting really strongly to someone.
Okay.
So in this case, 千万 means be very careful and make sure that you don't get a heat stroke.
I think make sure is perfect. Yeah. 不要 means don't want, right?
Yeah.
Or don't do something, right? Or
yes.
And then 中暑了, I'm assuming that's heat stroke.
中暑 is heat stroke, and 了 is just again a function word that we normally use in the end of sentence. So 那千万不要中暑了. Make sure you don't get a heat stroke.
Okay.
And the next one is 说到这儿，要不要来一碗我刚熬好的绿豆汤?
So this is, speaking of which, would you like a bowl of the mung bean soup I just made? It almost seems like it's not related, but yeah, I guess you can explain what mung bean soup is good for.
Yeah.
说到这儿.
Speaking of this.
Yeah, speaking of which, or speaking of this. 这儿 means this,
yes.
right? And 说 means speak, right?
Yes.
Then 要不要, this is like, do you want or do you not want? Right?
Yes.
要不要来一碗? So I'm thinking this denotes quantity. 一 is one, and then 碗 is bowl, right?
Yes.
And then 我刚熬, yeah?
我刚熬好.
So this is, I'm not sure what 熬 is here. Is this like to cook?
Yes, it's a way of cooking. It's more like a simmer. It can be used mostly in making soup or porridge, something with a lot of water in it.
Okay, so it's to simmer something. And then gang before that says 我刚熬, so is this just simmered?
Yeah.
So gang means just made?
Just made.
Oh, okay. And then 好的.
我刚熬好的. This one is more like a clause inside of a larger sentence.
Okay.
If you want to understand it in English, it means the soup that I just made. So I 刚 just 熬好 finished, simmered.
So then we have, right, 绿豆汤, right?
Yes.
And that, I think that's the mung bean, right? The 绿豆. And then 汤 is soup.
Yes. Literal translation of mung bean is actually green bean. When I first started to learn English for a really long time, I took 绿豆 as green bean in English, but then I realized it doesn't really work that way.
Yeah, we have different green beans. Our green beans are normally long. But I think here the mung beans are actually a bean, right?
Yes, it's like a dried, really hard
spherical.
Yeah, and it's not really in the color of grass green, but in a different shade of green.
Right.
I think you just talked about, having this mung bean soup after talking about heat stroke.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. It's like I'm hot and I'm dripping with sweat and you're going to offer me soup, which is normally hot. And it's like, I don't want that. That's not going to help with my heat stroke.
Yeah, but in traditional Chinese medicine, mung bean is something can work to release the heat inside of you. So it's considered kind of a staple soup that you would have in summers, especially in hot weathers. Like in different places, different cities, they have different versions of mung bean soup. Some of them are hot, some of them are cold. But across China, if you talk about mung bean soup, it means something to relieve the heat that's been building inside of you.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it can also work as a soup for an after drink to sort of help you to digest the alcohol inside your body as well.
Oh, so when you have a few drinks of wine or beer, then you drink this helps you maybe absorb some of the alcohol, perhaps?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, in traditional Chinese herb terms, it means 解毒, to release the toxics inside of you.
Interesting.
Yeah, but I think it can be understood in English as well.
It's really tough for us because it's a completely different medical system, and it's something that for me, because I've been living here for a while and I had an interest in, traditional Chinese medicine. So I've dug in a little bit more. So I understand what you're saying. But I think for some of our listeners out there, maybe those of us from, the West or whatever, it's a completely different concept.
It's delicious, if you put some sugar inside, especially. And
sugar inside soup? It's not even soup anymore. I think
it's like a dessert.
Yeah, sounds like a...
And I like to make the mung bean to the point that's kind of a mush, sort of mushed together. And so in the end, you're not really having a soup, but you're having this sweet paste. Well, it sounds not really...
Doesn't sound very good. It's like, you said it was like a greenish color, and it's a mush, and it's sweet. It's just like, it doesn't seem very... palatable, but I mean, if it's good for summer, then I guess that's really all that matters.
But it's good. It's so good, I guarantee you.
All right.
And then the last sentence is 好呀，给我来一碗.
Oh, okay. So that's just cool. I like to have a bowl of it. So 好呀, this is kind of like an agreement sound. Normally, people say this when they're just like, okay, or yeah.
Yeah.
And then 给我 means give me. 来, so 给我来 means to give me something, right?
Yes.
And then 一碗 is, as I mentioned earlier, one bowl of something.
Yes. So do you have any questions?
I think you covered most of my questions. Let's go ahead and I guess we can give this a try.
Okay, let's give it a try of the whole conversation.
All right.
你刚才去干什么了？怎么满头大汗？
天太热了。我只是出门走了走而已，就出了一身汗。
那可千万不要中暑了。说到这儿，要不要来一碗我刚熬好的绿豆汤？
好呀，给我来一碗。
You're listening to Takeaway Chinese with myself, Fei Fei, and Tony Reid in the studio. We would love to hear from you. Send us your thoughts via email to learnchinese@cri.com.cn. And coming up next, let's learn the 1,000 ways of cooling down in this hot summer, and more importantly, how to say it in Chinese.
1,000 ways, huh? Okay, I'm interested in hearing that.
So don't go away, so you will take some Chinese away. Welcome back to Takeaway Chinese. I'm Fei Fei, joined by Tony Reid. So Tony, we've been talking about how to cool down this summer. And I'm very curious, how do you do that in the US?
It's very easy. You just flick a switch. Just turn on the air. That's pretty much it. It's not that. Well, that's how most of us stay cool. Or we get in a car, maybe, and turn on the air in the car and go for a drive.
But you still travel with the AC on, right?
Absolutely. Of course. If it's really hot outside, if you roll down the windows, it's still going to be hot, right?
Exactly.
I mean, I'm from California, and the temperatures get up to, get over sometimes 40 degrees. And in this temperature, if you roll down the window, you're still going to be roasting. You're like an egg on a frying pan. So it's like we turn on the air. But I mean, in terms of activities, I think swimming, this is something that, if you're lucky enough to have a swimming pool, then you just go swimming, or you go to a friend's house who has a swimming pool.
Or go to the beach, in California.
If you live near the beach, right? California is a big state. I was nowhere near a beach, unfortunately. So for us, we would go to the lake, if there was a lake nearby.
Yeah.
Going near a body of water, or a lot of people will go to, honestly, most people just stay home. But for those that need to go out, they'll go to like a bigger place that uses air conditioning, like a shopping mall.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and then of course eat things that cool you down. And for us, a lot of people will drink these really big ice congested drinks like Slurpees or these things that are filled with ice to cool you down, maybe even some ice cream. And it's not healthy, but it's delicious.
Speaking of California, it reminds me a set phrase in Chinese called 骄阳似火. 骄阳 is like the proud sun. 似火 is like a ball of fire. So it's like having this scorching sun in the air all the time. It's an expression to say some places, maybe like California, has a lot of sunny days.
Yeah.
It's really hot in the summer. And so you mentioned about having a lot of ice drinks. And I have to say, I'm a fan of ice drink. The more ice, the merrier of me. But, my mom, she always warned me of having too much of these ice drinks, which she considered is bad for my body in the long term.
I learned that when coming to China too. It was so contrary to what I grew up believing and experiencing. Yeah, I guess if it's hot outside and your body is naturally hot, I think in Fahrenheit it's like 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Not sure what it is in Celsius, but if you're taking in ice, which is substantially lower, there's going to cause some problem or imbalance in the body where, I guess, moisture will accumulate in the body.
Ooh.
Just like when you pour some cold water into, say, a hot frying pan, what happens? You see a bunch of steam, right?
Coming out of it.
Right. So for our bodies, if we're taking in these really cold drinks, the steam, I guess, emits in our body, but it doesn't get a chance to get out. So that moisture kind of builds up, and then you get sick and you have different problems.
Wow, you explain it so good. I don't have to do the explanation here. So, my mom would cook a lot of hot soups, like the mung bean soup we just talked about in summer. Several years ago, I can't really understand. It's like 40 degrees outside and you're handing me a bowl of hot, steaming soup.
Exactly.
And just telling me that this will cool yourself down.
I think a lot of people would have that same mindset, especially if they're from, America or the West. It's like, I just told you that it's like 38 degrees out here, and why are you giving me a bowl of soup that's just as hot?
Yeah.
It's
and it's not just mung bean soup. There are other soups, hot soups, like in southern part of China, like Guangzhou or Hunan or Fujian provinces, they would have duck soups. And more precisely, old duck soups.
Like a duck?
A whole duck with other ingredients as well.
Hey.
But it says it's not like a young duck, a small duck, but you have to cook the old duck.
Old oily duck, huh?
老鸭. And they said 老鸭汤, old duck soup, is also helping you to cool yourself down in summers.
Wow.
And I actually tried to cook pot of the duck soup before, and I followed a really traditional Kan Guangdong recipe, and had not only have the old duck, a whole duck in it, it also have the jujube, the hongzao.
Jujubes.
Yeah, and also some rice. Also some other ingredients I can't really remember, but the whole soup is kind of sweet because of the jujube fruits, because of hongzao. And it says it's good for your body because it helps you to release the moisture, the steam inside of you, as you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And also it doesn't have the bad effects of cold drinks. And, but it's delicious. It's a sweet duck soup. Again, it doesn't sound really appetizing.
No, it doesn't. I mean, again, meat or ducks or any kind of meat with a sweet taste to it is just a little bit contrary, again, to what most of us are familiar with. But I have to go back to what I've learned in traditional Chinese medicine. And again, I'm not a student of the practice. It's just that when I came here, it was so bizarre to me that it was, my father's in the, Western medicine. He's a doctor. And I also grew up, going to school to be a doctor as well. So I'm kind of trained in the Western way of medicine. So when I discovered Chinese medicine, I just thought that none of this makes sense. Why this? Why that? Why this? Why that? So when I came to China, I had so many questions, and some of those answers have been answered through some of my research. And the food is looked upon in a different way. For example, there are certain foods that have a hot kind of energy to it.
Yes.
And then there's certain foods that are neutral. And then you have some that have a cold energy in them. So naturally, if it's hot outside and your body has too much heat, right, then you're going to start having certain issues with your body. And of course, if you're too cold or if you're too hot, they have different symptoms, right?
Yes.
So if you're too hot, then you probably need to consume things that are more neutral or more cold. And so this is something that I had to discover later. And I found that certain foods, like, for example, watermelon, something that we all like to eat during the summertime when it's hot. This is something that's on that spectrum of cold. So it cools the body. So this is something that is, kind of good to eat. Cucumber, this is another thing that's, and so it was just, there's a whole list of foods that are hot and cold and have different energies that I wasn't aware of before. And I found that some of the problems that I had was I was consuming way too many hot things.
上火.
上火.
You were easily to
gets really, really hot. So hot, in fact, that when I was in Korea, temperature there got colder in the winter than I was used to because I'm from California. But I would go jogging in this cold weather and people would be staring at me like I was Godzilla walking down the street. And at first I was like, oh, maybe it's because they're not used to foreigners. But then I passed by a window and I looked at myself and I saw steam emitting from my head, like so much. So I looked like this match that was burnt out and the smoke was just coming from my head. And I was like, oh my goodness. And so when I saw he was Korean, but he studied Chinese medicine, and he says, oh, you're eating way too many hot foods. Everything you're consuming is hot, hot, hot. So yeah, you need to, consume more foods that remove the moisture and of course cool down. So that was my introduction to hot foods and cold foods. So it's it's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. As the hot features that you mentioned, and also the cold features, the 凉, 凉性, the cold features.
凉性.
凉性. For instance, in southern regions here, that people drink a lot of 凉茶.
凉茶, okay, cold tea.
Well, it's not cold, actually. By the name of it, cool tea, it sounds like it's cold tea, like iced tea that you would have in other countries. But it actually refers to the features that you just mentioned.
Oh, the nature of the herb.
The herbs they use in making this tea is 凉性, is cooling. So that's why they call it 凉茶, cool tea. But it doesn't mean it's cold. It has ice in it. It can be hot. It can be room temperature.
Okay.
But the features of it is cold.
Right.
It's 凉性. So that's why they call it 凉茶.
凉茶.
And also the food that we just talked about, the mung bean, the old duck, and also the lotus seeds that a lot of Chinese people love to eat in summers, are also considered 凉性.
Okay.
To have that cooling effect, cooling features. So that's why we are having these in the summers, and we believe that having mung bean soup, 绿豆汤, having 老鸭汤, old duck soup, is going to help us to cool down inside my body, even though I'm sweating outside. And it's also considered to be a good thing to have a lot of sweat in the summer. Not a lot, not too much, but to have a healthy amount of sweating in the summers.
I think sweating is amazing for detoxification. We all need to do it. And I think there are people out there who cannot sweat a lot, no matter how hard they exercise, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think that can be dangerous as well, because you can't really tell whether you are having a heat stroke or not.
Right.
So it's easier to get a heat stroke if you're not, normally sweating a lot. So
yes,
be careful with that.
That too. And then for people who just naturally sweat a lot, it doesn't mean that they're dying of a heat stroke either. I think a lot of people, when they see me, they look concerned, but it's just natural. For me, in my family, we just sweat a lot. So it's just, it's natural. I've never experienced a heat stroke, so I'm very lucky from that standpoint too.
Yeah, so in your family, maybe what ran down is like the 大汗淋漓. They're sweating a lot all the time.
满头大汗, right?
Yes, 满头大汗. And 大汗淋漓 is another set phrase that you can use to describe you are sweating a lot.